Now let's talk about the economy. The aim of borrowing is to help the government to attain their developmental needs in the areas of infrastructure, health, education, power, and transportation. Disturbed by the accumulation of debts, the International Monetary Fund warned Nigeria of the consequences, particularly of servicing costs, which could consume substantial amounts of government revenues. In a recent statement by the Debt Management Office on Nigeria's debt situation, the statement talks about the total public debt, which encompasses the domestic and external debt stock of the federal and 36 states government and the Federal Capital Territory, and this is standing at 22.38 trillion naira or $73.21 billion as of June 30, 2018.
We are immersed in debt.
In debt. Okay, so how has this debt helped us? That's one of the questions that we'll be asking this morning. And to help us answer this, we have in our Lagos studios, Mr. Chizia Boniface is an economist. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And in our Abuja studio, we have another economist, Mr. Tokwe Fashua.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, so let me start with you, Mr. Fashua. All of this debt, we're talking about 22-point-something trillion naira as of June 30th. How this figure, how is it that it has helped us in terms of infrastructure, health, and other social amenities?
Well, thanks for the question. I think there's a certain school of thought that actually promotes the use of debt for development, as it were. Even though I don't quite subscribe to that school of thought, I think that's where we're jumping the gun. Well, in times past, if we look at other larger economies and developed economies, yes, they did raise domestic bonds and so on to, even to prosecute wars and so on. But there was it wasn't just about the money; it was also about the patriotism that they brought in. So perhaps that should tell us that that wherever we're going to get to as a people, we have to help ourselves. Now, of course, it's surprising that the IMF and World Bank have been warning us of late that, you guys are going back into a debt trap. I remember the era of the debt trap. I remember, of course, it was also occasioned by high debt servicing, whereby a country is using more than half of its annual revenue to pay back debt. And it seems like we're back in that era, Now, the excuse about, we're borrowing for infrastructure is okay to an extent, but is also a flawed argument. To the extent that I'll say, what kind of infrastructure are you borrowing for? Number one. Number two, what happened to your own internal resources? I think I may have said it on this channel before. In 1962, Nigeria borrowed $13.5 million to build a Papa Road. And the idea then, of course, anybody can search that. It's there on the internet, the World Bank document. It was to ease the clearing of goods from the Apapa Wharf. In 2016, we were also trying to borrow another $50 million to decongest the same Apapa Road. Then you now ask yourself, between 1962 and 2016, or even 2018 till today, when there's a gridlock in Apapa right now as we speak, a total breakdown of infrastructure in the nation's most important port and perhaps our most important singular infrastructure revenue source. What has happened to all the money we made over the years? If you don't manage your own resources well, no amount of debt can ever save you. So I would say that, number one, yes, it is justified to borrow for infrastructure, especially if that infrastructure is going to give you a little bit of the cash flow you need for the repayment of the debt. I'm writing an article now which I titled, The Debt Nigeria Does Not Intend to Pay. Because we don't intend to pay this debt. We're borrowing money for polio eradication. We're borrowing money for water provision, for example. How much money are people going to pay for the water they drink for you to repay the dollars that you have borrowed for you to provide water for them? We went to Hungary, the country called Hungary in Eastern Europe, and Hungary is not particularly the richest country in Europe, but we borrowed $55 million from them. That caused a kind of a demonstration among Nigerians who live in Hungary to say, why are you guys coming here? You know, and that $55 million was meant for us to also provide even the paperwork towards giving our people sustainable water. I believe that we should only borrow for infrastructure when that infrastructure is repaying itself. But I think we should borrow responsibly. And like Lee Kuan Yew would like to say, that in a democracy is meant to be the rule of the majority, but that the majority of a people are the children yet unborn. So every time we're going to collect all of those loans, we should always ask ourselves, what will our children unborn say? If they are born and then they realize that we have actually mortgaged their future, we have borrowed right now into the next 30, 40 years, I'm not sure they'll be happy. So some of us have to speak up for those people. Let us look at our own internal resources, and those resources are there. Those cash flow sources are there for us to fund our infrastructure and every other thing in between.
Okay.
Which is it? Yes. 22 trillion. That seems to be a lot of money. And one would have expected that if we had so much debt, there would be an acceleration of development in our country. But we don't seem to be seeing anything.
Yeah. Well, I think that I have a fundamental disagreement somewhere.
Okay.
You know, yes, I don't think that you should borrow to consume. And that's exactly what you've done. And what you refer to is the fact that over the past 3 years, you know, we had recession, so revenues flow, you know, had come down, and then we started to borrowing to pay salaries. We borrowed, you know, to meet, you know, under cost recovery from importation of petroleum products, and so I think that we shouldn't do that because I know you should borrow, you know, for capital expenditure. Ideally, how do you run the country? The way you run the country is that you should run the country ideally by tax revenue. So you go and collect revenue. I mean, it's a good thing. What Federal Inland Revenue Services, what they are doing today in terms of the volumes we are collecting by way of taxation. You mustn't. That's what you should use to fund, you know, so to fund salaries and so on and so forth, maintenance, recurrent expenditure. That's what you should use. Well, what has happened is that, you know, we've come on this crisis. You just asked now, we've borrowed. The last time I looked at the records, under this government, the debt stock had increased by 90%. 90% in 3 years. And so now, so it stands at 90%, yes. And so it stands at 24, you know, as the said, as we just reported, trillion naira. That's what it is today. And so you say to yourself, how is the borrowing going to be paid back?
That's the question I was going to ask you next. How are we going to pay off all this debt?
So if you borrow for consumption, how are you going to pay that back? And so issues about generational equity, you know, that's who are coming behind. You know, it's exactly something happens. You find that state governments, they borrow. You know, the tenure is going to expire. I go on a borrowing binge. You know, I borrow, accumulate the thing, and then part of it is floated away, and then the incoming administration inherits the debt. And it comes and then it's unstrung. But then when you borrowed, and it is going to be debited as source. So you have a sort of issues. So we mustn't borrow. We should borrow. In fact, borrowing in itself, you know, there's nothing wrong with it. You know, so
every country borrows.
You borrow. But it seems that when you borrow, you know, there are limits. You know, in terms of, you know, government mustn't borrow more than 40% of its GDP and so on and so forth. And what is even more critical in this respect is that you're borrowing, repayment, servicing, and your income. Now, if, for instance, you're going to borrow and service the percentage of your income that you're going to expend on debt services is maybe 60%, then what will be left for you to run, you know, to run your services, to pay salaries, and so on and so forth? So I think that, you know, you just asked a pertinent question. 90% increase, where is it? And so we've not seen, we've not seen phenomenal developments everywhere. We've not seen new roads, we've not seen new airports, we've not seen anything. So you're saying to yourself, all this accumulation of debt, where has it gone into? But the fact of the matter is that we come on crisis, we had revenue shortfalls, you had softness in the oil market, and the results were dwindling.
We had.
Yes, well, you know,
but
yes.
Not today now. Our
Today's coming
up. Showed up now.
Yes, it's coming up now. Oil is now about $70 per barrel. But when we had before the recession, you know, yes, that was what led us into recession. That's why we say oil led us into recession. Oil took us out of recession. And so we had issues. And then in the crisis, you know, we had bailouts. We had to bail out some states and so on and so forth, you know. And this money was just borrowed and given to them. The alternative is to print money, and of course you print money, and then that's a physical responsibility. Then the value of your currency will go to the dogs.